Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone is joining into the show today. My name is Brent. I'm the host for Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. Today we have Cheryl Hardcastle, the former NDP MLA for Ontario, joining onto the show. Good afternoon, everyone. We got Cheryl Hardcastle joining us today, and I'm pleased to welcome you back. Cheryl, how are you today? Happy Canada Day, everyone.
Hi, Brent. Hi, everybody. I'm doing okay. I'm still convalescing from COVID. I had the latest subvariant, I guess, the BA4, and you get a headache with it more than the others, I guess. So I've been trying to convalesce and following everything that's going on politically and trying to be a good ally for people with disabilities meanwhile. So it's great to be back with you all and touch base with you. We haven't talked since the results of the provincial election in Ontario, and I know that it felt like a real blow to a lot of people who are advocating for rights for people with disabilities, and a lot of people just really need to still mentally recover from that, because the fight's going to continue and we got to recharge our batteries, don't we?
Absolutely, Cheryl, and I totally agree with you. Disability advocacy doesn't take a break in the summer. It's an ongoing battle going forward, and we're eager, and we put the energy forward, and we just keep on going, and representing the ones who don't have voices, or maybe they do have voices, but they just don't feel comfortable about speaking out on how they feel. And so we're here and to doing the best we can to keep pushing forward and holding the officials in power accountable for inequalities.
That's right. Yeah, and for those of us that come from, we come from vast and varied places across this great country. We're celebrating Canada Day, and to me, being a person who is progressive, it's never about just keeping the status quo, no matter how great you think it is. There's always room for improvement. There's always room to be making progress. So while we are embracing Canada Day, we do have to face a lot of truths. Not just with truth and reconciliation and how we're dealing with colonialism in our Indigenous communities, but how we're dealing with ableism, how we're dealing with changing that status quo. And it's really important to me to be able to keep doing that in a positive context. But yourself, sometimes when we're talking together, you really do need to be able to express the frustration, because it just seems like, I remember being at advocacy town halls, like even back in the late 1970s, about issues that you feel like, it's one step forward every 40 years or something. And all these reports that I've talked about before, we're failing people with disabilities. And right now, you hear a lot of talk about the housing crisis, and we have new builds happening in my area, and they're all apartments that are to fit with existing zoning, so you don't have to have an elevator. It's very typical to build these 3-story buildings. And we're just perpetuating more accessibility issues. And there's no enforcement of any type of accessible housing. I would love to see universal design. We know that there's reduced costs for long-term care. Eventually, everybody's going to experience some kind of a disability. You reduce injury. There are so many positives to having buildings that are accessible. And having been around, I remember feeling sort of excited years ago when the building code, it's the only thing that they actually enforce in the Ontario building code, is that new builds have to be 15% visitability. And you guys remember that term, visitability, right? I'm done with visitability. I want this universal design where I thought that was a springboard. I thought that was to get people used to it and acclimated to what accessibility really meant, and changing that ableist view of how construction design works. I thought that's what was happening decades ago, and we're still mired in the same issues. And I know I've said this here before at the federal level, where I've really spent a lot of my time analyzing policy and advocating for policy improvements. And it's like every federal dollar that is spent should not be perpetuating the barriers that we have and creating new barriers. And they still are. It's still happening. So I do have some level of frustration, and I know I can share that with you all candidly because you do. But at the same time, I appreciate this space, and I know I've expressed that before, to have a group of people who are astute and are advocacy driven and who feel like their voice does matter, and we're not going to throw in the towel. We're going to keep pressing. So those are just a few of my initial thoughts I threw out there. Hopefully I can, sort of spur some comments from yourselves, and we can have a discussion about how things are going. One last thing I'll leave with is just in the news, with our new Ford government, there was a promise of a 5% ODSP increase. And I don't know how you guys greet those kinds of announcements, but it's not enough, and it's very hard to express that, isn't it? That this idea that we are so far behind in addressing legislated poverty that 5% isn't enough. And we're supposed to say, well, it's better than nothing. But I feel like that's the mentality that we've been encouraged to have. Be a team player, work with these governments and encourage them. But a 5% increase would be nothing. And now we're hearing these really ambiguous comments at the provincial level in Ontario again. When is this going to be followed through on? Same thing with, the consultations for the disability benefit at the federal level. No real meaningful movement on these things. And we're expected, we as advocates, as allies, as people living with disabilities who are fighting for equality, are expected to be collegial and not be angry and impatient, and the desperation is real. I've heard people I've actually read on Twitter people talking about the word poverty and how do you express when someone is so far below poverty? What is a good word to underscore that for people who are, reading these tweets and reading this language? We're not just talking about poverty. We're talking about deep poverty, talking about desperately low levels of legislated poverty, right? So yeah, that's where I'll leave it for now and get some feedback from people. More than happy to have the discussion.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Cheryl. So I'll start first, and then we'll kind of go into different questions from people or comments.
Sure.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, happy Canada Day to you, Cheryl. I hope you feel better really soon. I know it's going to take some time, and people are having different symptoms, different effects from the virus for sure. And I wish you a great recovery on that. Sonia's mom's had it twice, so yeah, yeah. So with that being said, I mean, we just have to just be careful the best way we can, and just keep trugging forward. And with advocacy and everything that's going on, they rose for the summer in the Parliament. How convenient, right? Without
Right.
getting the bill going through even second reading. I didn't. I kind of said that on my show before. I'd be really surprised if they did get through second reading, and my theory was right. But I figured that at least they could have done right. The officials was at least put an intern amount in while they
Absolutely.
while they bang that horse. I mean, it's just to me, people living in dire poverty in a wealthy country, it just does not make sense. So kind of with that being said, like fast forwarding, I've had Patricia on. She's a strong advocate. And you've met her on here many times. And so she's really been talking a lot lately about basic income and how important basic income is going forward for people. She believes that that's the way that society is going to go. With it.
I
for
hope
all.
so.
Yeah, I mean for all, right? I mean, including people with disabilities. She would be the more expertise of talking on that. I mean, I know a lot of her talking points on it, and of course she'd be happy. Like, thanks, Brent. Thanks for helping me along. But it's true though, and that's kind of like how the GLBI is, but it's a different, like it's similar version to it. She would probably differ with me a little bit on that part, but it is the same concept. It's kind of like how Joseph, he talks about the same thing about GLBI, and this the amazing part is that they have all the information. The officials know where to go with that, and it's almost like they playing the delay tactic just so they don't have to help people out. Especially with what. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, Brent, I've made this observation before, and I'm sure you all have too. I feel like when we're gaining momentum in a narrative about equality, about human rights, we have a human rights code that's supposed to be superior to everything else, and the government just ignores that. Like there's no mention about housing or guaranteed livable income or universal basic income. It's a distraction, isn't it?
It is.
I feel like it is, like, to have us debate the semantics of language. You're legislating poverty right now, and you have the power to interim inject funds to these people. You can do it, but it's this distraction for us to be talking about even talking about how you measure poverty. Do we use a market basket approach, and we use a low income measure, and all these terms, like it's a distraction that makes you have these really academic debates about the semantics. And I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm being super cynical, but I do get frustrated with that as well, because I feel like that is distracting from the issue of political courage to take action.